Mm-hmm. All right, so so what's one way to guarantee that a number is either even or odd? Like, how else could you express any particular number? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, it looks like you already know that answer to that question. So, yeah. So, okay. Okay. Yeah. Oops. So you get the bijection. M times n is odd if and only if m is odd and n is odd. Right, so you're trying to do that way. And again, using the contrapositive. So, right. Or no, you did that way. So if m times n is odd, then m is odd and n is odd. Right, and then you said use the contrapositive, so right, so if m is even or n is even, then their product is going to also be even. Or for anybody else watching who doesn't know exactly what just happened here, contrapositive is saying, okay, I'm going to take the statement as it is and then flip it around and make everything negative. Yeah, so this is actually not too bad. You have to do, because you have or, now you need two cases. So one is if m is even, and the other is if n is even. I mean, you're assuming that m and n are just integers anyway. So you can make no judgment on n if m is even. You just say n is an integer. Right, or m is any integer and n is even. So n equals 2a or whatever. So then when you've got that stuff, then you say, okay, now what's m times n? And in both cases, you end up getting the same stuff. So you've got to do it separately. What is this? Mini boss theme. Alright. I believe it. It's very 8-bit. Anyway, yeah, so you're just replacing one of these. You don't need to. Because here you're actually enveloping that case already. You're saying that n is any integer. And it doesn't even matter as long as m is even. And over here, same deal. If m can be any integer while n is even, then you're already doing the cases where you have both. So the other thing that you're thinking, and I did this for a long time too, don't feel bad, is what you were actually looking at is the exclusive OR case, which is when one is true but the other is definitely not true. And so you were saying like, oh, well, what if both are even? Again, that could be a third case, but you don't need to do it. So when you're using a mathematical OR, or Boolean OR, you're saying either one is true or the other's true or both are true at the same time. And it encompasses all three options. I like that one. Oh, it's kind of fun. Yeah, there's no way to like factor. So I was just thinking, could you like do this as direct proof, but not really, because m times n has to be an odd number, so it's just 2n or 2a plus 1, but then it doesn't yield anything if you go forward. So yeah, totally. Alright, no problem. Anybody else have any interest in anything? Yeah, so my my other Python program that I was kicking around up there is looking at what would happen if we had a Pascal triangle. And actually, one of them was a problem that Matt Parker had put out in Matt Parker's Maths Puzzles. And so what was that? Yeah, what do you get for the numbers of odds and evens that you get as you go through the Pascal triangle? And I just happen to already have been building the Pascal triangle as a Python program, and I was like, well, that's kind of convenient that I'm doing this. And the ratio of odd to total numbers in a Pascal triangle ends up going to 0. I think it is odds. Yeah. Ends up going to 0 because you only get odd numbers pretty much around the edges of it basically turns out to be a Sierpinski triangle, and the even values that we get end up taking over just everything. They are like the main area of the triangles, whereas the odd numbers are just like the outlines. So you're basically looking at, like, as something gets really big, what is the ratio between its perimeter and its area, which is near 0. But yeah, one of my my dean at my college was like, well, I've got an interesting problem for you. So what would happen if, like, you were looking at this, Pascal triangle, and you took the sum of all the rows? You look at just all the sums going across. And as it turns out, with the original Pascal triangle, this is going to be a ratio of 2 between each row getting all the sums. And then I did something a little bit weird, not surprising, which was, instead of doing the standard Pascal triangle, what would happen if you started adding up a different number of rows? So I said, okay, let's not do, here, let's copy this. Come on. What would happen if we added up, this was, where I said, what about Fibonacci? So what happens if you take, just like the Fibonacci sequence, what happens if you take the previous 2 rows and add them up to get the stuff in each one of these? So you still get the 1 up top, you still get the 1 and 1 here. But now when you come down to the next row, you're adding the 2 rows that are connected up above it. So here this would end up being a 2 here. This one would end up adding the 2 rows above it, so it's a 3. It's 5. So around the outer edge, you get the Fibonacci sequence instead of all 1s. So 5, 8, 13, 20, 21, etc. And this is kind of just where my brain went. I don't know why. So the 2 rows that are connected to this one right here are here, the 1 and the 1, just like with the regular Pascal's triangle, you get the 2. But then you also add the 1 above that. So this ends up being a 3. So 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2. And then here, again, 2 rows is going to be everything in sort of this triangle here. So to get the number at the tip of the triangle, you add all the numbers in the triangle up above here in, again, an arrangement of 2 rows above. So here this is 5, 6, 7. And then naturally this is also going to be symmetric on the other side. Alright, so 7, 7. Alright, and then below that we get, again, same triangle here. This is going to be 10 plus 5 is 15. Same on the other side. And then for this one we get 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 21. Again here, add the 2 rows above is going to be 20, 30, and 30. And the 2 middles are going to be 36, 46, and 7 is 53. I did this all automated, by the way. I was not going to do this by hand. But it was kind of an interesting endeavor just to play around with it a little bit by hand without doing a lot of this work in a calculator or anything like that. Just, see how far I could get. Diversion, Not going to tell you. Anyway, So then we'd look at the sum of each of the rows. And the sum of the first row is 1, sum of the second row is 2. Not really surprising there. Sum of the third row is now different. So instead of being 4 like this one was, this is 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. This one down here is going to be 20. This is 20, 40, 61. This is going to be 60, 76, 176, 179. Unless I just totally screwed that up, but it's fine. Whatever. So then we look at the ratios between each of the rows. Ratio between 1 and 2 is going to be 2. Ratio between 2 and 7, or rather 7 divided by 2, right? So what are you multiplying by, essentially? It's going to be 3.5. 20 over 7 is going to be, can't do that one in my head, sorry, 2.85714. More stuff after. And 179 over 61 is going to be 2.934426, and all the other stuff like that. Now, I noticed immediately when I started doing this, and again, I did this in a spreadsheet at some point, so I was just kind of like pull down the formula and get all of it. But I noticed that as we started going down, these numbers were oscillating back and forth between two values, or between a higher and lower value, and starting to converge in the middle. So then I wanted to know what that was. So I went down as far as I could in this list and tried to get certain values. Tried to see what we could get. And unfortunately, that spreadsheet is at my work, which I have not seen my office or my computer at my office in a year. So, hooray. Yeah, and stupid me, I forgot to like upload it to Google or something so that I could at least like work on it at home. I was just, you know, too interested in leaving at that point. But at any rate, yeah, so we know that the so this was an interesting problem in and of itself, because I was looking at this and I'm saying, okay, what is this going to get me if I'm just looking at this in terms of like the Fibonacci Pascal triangle? So if I add the two terms above it, you're going to get the Fibonacci sequence along the sides. This is cool, right? And we know that the ratios of the successive terms of the Fibonacci sequence start approaching phi. So just approach phi, which is equal to 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2. I mean, this is a problem that anybody can do, right? This is something that anybody who's even got like a decent amount of algebra can figure this whole thing out. Doesn't take somebody special, like, you know, super high level or anything. This is a basic number theory problem. I mean, I'd probably even get interested in high school had I been exposed to it. So you take the ratios of just the Fibonacci sequence around the outside edge, and those are 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2. So then I was like, all right, well, what are the ratios of these sums converging to? So eventually I worked this down, and I was able to figure out like a closed form for it. It looks something like this. Again, I don't know what it is offhand. I had it at one point. We could probably find it again. But I had it out to like, I don't know, 10, 12 decimal places. And then I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, like, how do you get this in a form that is recognizable? And eventually it hit me that, like, I know what this is. I mean, one way that we could do it is by doing a oh man, forgot the name of it. That's awful. Recursion. Anyway, recurring fraction. So something that's like, again, here we're going to have 2 plus, and then we're going to find a fraction, which ends up having, you know, a over b plus c over d plus e over f plus. You can figure out a fraction that makes this work. So you start filling in the numbers a, then b, then c, then d, then e, that start approximating the number you're targeting. So, I mean, you'd have to, again, have this out to a lot of decimal places before you actually start doing this. But, and again, this is a simple problem that you could even do in a spreadsheet. You could just, like, take a formula, make the triangle super easy, because all you're doing is adding, if you're going to tilt it this way and make it, you know, this is your first column of your spreadsheet, then your sum is always going to be, again, the stuff inside this triangle. So it's going to be, if we're looking at this 7 here, this is going to be the thing that is directly above it, the 3, the thing that is diagonally up, the 2, and then diagonally up above that, which is off the chart in this particular case, and also diagonally above the 3 and directly above the 3. So it kind of makes this like triangle sum, which goes like this, of the 2 rows that are above it. And then at some point I was like, well, this is interesting. What happens if we make an Fibonacci Pascal triangle? So now we start thinking, like, we're going to sum up the previous n rows to get where we are in the entire triangle. So I said like Fibonacci Pascal triangle is going to be, again, draw this out. Oh wait, I did this. Go over there and click paste. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. And of course, I grabbed it with my mouse instead of the actual thing I'm supposed to be grabbing it with. Let's get rid of that. So here, the Fibonacci for this particular value here would be the sum of the 1, 2, 3, 4 rows above it. So it would be there. And again, there are some empty spaces here because I'm not that far down in the triangle yet. So then, again, naturally I tried to find all of the different constants that were coming out of this. So the ratios were converging individually within each Fibonacci Pascal triangle. And then I said, as we're increasing this, the ratios are converging to something else. So what if I did it in an Infininachi? Yes, I can help you with your homework. Let me know what your problem is, and I'll keep on this for about 30 seconds. So I said, what happens if I do an Infininachi? Which is, I am going to add everything that is above any particular value to get the individual thing that is in there. Oh, nice. Okay. And, Craig, you're going to love this. The ratio converges to 1 plus the square root of 3. Done. I've been really focusing on trig so much over the past several years, I immediately noticed that this was something to do with the square root of 3. And then I was like, well, that's just the square root of 3. I typed it into my calculator and got 1 plus the square root of 3. I'm like, that is insane. So I'm going to do some sort of write-up eventually. But yeah, it was a moment. And then I said, well, if this converges, then it probably also converges if we start looking at doing this in n dimensions. So rather than just doing it in n rows, now we can think of it in n dimensions, which is precisely where my channel name comes from. So n simplex is an n-dimensional simple figure, i.e. triangle, tetrahedron, hypertetrahedron, whatever you want to call it. So I'm trying to figure out in 4, 5, and 6 dimensions what the ratio is going to be, but it's extremely hard. Okay, so Shiesty EBK, here we go. So this is some interesting stuff to get into someday, but yeah, I would too. I'm not a very good writer, unfortunately, but I'll get there. You know, I gotta ask my dean and my immediate boss, who do write-ups all the time, to help me out with this. Okay, so what I would like you to think about, you're gonna hate me for this, but what I would like you to think about is looking at the original, what I call parent function. Oops. Sorry, that wasn't low enough. Now, this may take a minute, but I'm really all about making this a, deep understanding so that you can understand anything that's thrown at you. Hello, Nam Igod? Or Dogeman? Is that it? Is it backwards? So, we're looking at the parent function y equals x squared. You can shift this thing around. If you've seen how to do function transformation, how to do function transformation, no, don't worry about it, is that we're going to look at the original function and say, all right, if I were to add, subtract, add or multiply things to various locations in this particular function, it does something to the graph. So the general function transformation, and again, you're going to hate me for this, but the general function transformation for any function looks like this. For a quadratic, it looks like this. Now the thing is, usually we don't even put the b here. because what we can do is say, okay, this whole thing's being squared. This is going to be like a times b squared times x minus c parentheses squared plus d. And then if you notice here, this is just a constant on the outside of the function part itself. So really, this a times b squared is the same as a. So that's really kind of the same thing. It's just a constant. So this is just a different constant. Call it like a star times x minus c parentheses squared plus d. And if you've ever played around with the functions, you know what these things do. I highly recommend that you go into some calculator somewhere. You know, desmos.com/calculator is a free online graphing calculator you can use, and it instantaneously comes up with the graph of the function you want. So I'm going to recommend that you put in something like this equation here, and you can even put in the general form for this equation, and then hit like, I want sliders for A, C, and D. And then by the way that you play with the sliders for A, C, and D, you can see what it does to the function. So, you probably have already seen this set for the function, only somebody wrote it like this. This was a times x minus h squared plus k. The vertex is h comma k. Or, if we look at it from this black version here, the vertex is c comma d. Okay, now this doesn't seem like super impressive. That's okay, don't worry. We're not there yet. You're gonna get your mind blown at gonna get your mind blown here pretty soon. So what we're gonna do is multiply this out and put it into the general form for polynomials. So for this, we're gonna take x minus h and square it, multiply it out. If you have trouble with multiplying out polynomials like this, I'm going to recommend that you use the x minus h table form. This is a great way to organize. So you multiply x minus h by x minus h, you get x squared, you get a negative hx. Doesn't really matter which way you put it around, but still, a negative hx here, and an h squared here, positive h squared. Then when you add these all up, I am also a bit of a neat freak sometimes when it comes to this stuff, so sorry. When you want the product, it is the field that you just made. So the sum of all these terms here is x squared minus hx minus hx plus h squared, or x squared minus 2hx plus h squared. That now can go into here. All right, and then we get a plus k at the end. We can multiply all this stuff through, or the a, multiply the a through, and we get y equals a x squared. This should look familiar. Minus 2a h x plus a h squared plus k. Wait for it. So now what we have is you have ax squared plus bx plus c. The ax squared is the same as the ax squared, right? Didn't change at all. This other thing, negative 2ah has to be the same as b, because these are terms that both have an x in them. And we do this in some of the higher level maths all the time. So calculus, differential equations, stuff like that. We say, okay, anything with the x squared has to be equal. So here ax squared equals ax squared, therefore a equals a. All right, that's not a interesting statement. We know that a equals a. But over here, the stuff that has the x has to match with the stuff that has the x. So b has to be equal to negative 2ah. B has to be equal to negative 2ah. And also, C has to be equal to ah squared plus k. Now, what you wanted was the location of the vertex and the axis of symmetry and a formula to get them. See where I'm going with this? The vertex was located at h, comma k. We now have equations down here which have an h and a k in them. This is the kind of deep level understanding that you absolutely need to have for mathematics and that nobody teaches in school. Why? Because it takes time. How long did it take me to do this? And how long were you sitting there impatiently saying, oh God, would you just please get the formula? Right, this requires, no offense, it happens all the time. It happens with my students all the time. So here we want to solve for h, which is again the x coordinate for the vertex. So h is equal to, divide both sides by negative 2a. b divided by negative 2a. Or, you know what, let's do that in red, because keep it consistent. Vertex is going to be, the h value here is negative b over 2a. The k value we can solve over here in this equation. K is equal to c minus a h squared. Well, h squared, we just found out what h was, so we can plug that in. K equals c minus a times h is negative b over 2a squared. K is equal to c minus a times, this is going to be b squared over 4a squared. This a can multiply, or in this case we divide out. I mean... So this is relating these two pieces together. If you're not understanding it, I'm going to recommend that you... I mean, it also depends on what level of school you're in. If you are in, you know, high school, there's not a whole lot you can do in terms of like, well, in terms of like, so I teach at the college level. In terms of what I would tell my students if they said something like that, I would probably say, look into your options about withdrawing from the course, and then go back to like Khan Academy and like go to the bottom level, absolutely bottom level, and just start from the ground and work your way up and try to rebuild this. Because really what's happening here is, you know, not like you're not good at math. It's like you just haven't had the appropriate foundation for the building. So you gotta really understand the base level stuff before you can move up. And that's a lot of the problems with, let's be honest, that's a lot of the problems with the American education institution in general. It is not meant to teach you everything. Right? It is at the moment set up so that it just keeps pushing you along, and like you said, but if you look and really focus on like what Sal Khan is saying in Khan Academy, look at his philosophy, a lot of it is sound. It's that we're trying to build this foundation and trying to get you to understand stuff at a low level and then start building up from there and keep working and keep working. Everything is dependent upon this, what he calls, and now it's in the education industry everywhere, the growth mindset. So really, you got to think like your brain is not fixed. It's not going to stop working or stop growing at any point in your life. That's one of the awesome things about human, the human condition in general, is that we keep learning up until the day we die. I mean, I also had several students who were like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s who learned new math. I don't mean literally new, I just mean new for them. Stuff that they never thought they'd be able to learn it. They're like, "Oh man, I'm terrible at math." I'm like, "No. Let's work at this." So we keep going at that low level and really understanding the basic fundamentals of all of algebra. And once you understand the basic fundamentals of all algebra, then we can start working at more complicated stuff. And I've also got a YouTube channel, which is, again, N Simplex Pachinko, which is looking at a bunch of this stuff that I've created, that I've decided to like break down to the fundamental levels and try to teach people like the lowest, or the I've been trying to teach in different methods that are fundamental to like really understanding a whole bunch of stuff. So it's not just, here's a formula, let's do work. Because I hate giving my students a formula without them understanding how it works. So, at any rate, let's finish this up, and then let me see if we can go back, because this is, yeah, we can make this work. All right, k value here, c minus b squared over 4a. It's going to be our k value. So that is now our I try. I've got so I've got the like drive to do this kind of stuff, to really make a lot of connections, but a lot of my other colleagues are way better at like the student side of things. Here's the other thing that is going to blow a couple of your minds. If you look at this value here, this c minus b squared minus or over 4a, and then you combine these terms, c can be combined with our fraction here by putting this as 4a times c over 4a minus b squared over 4a. This is 4ac minus b squared over 4a, which is negative parentheses b squared minus 4ac over 4a. Oh, sorry, no, that's not c, that's k. Recognize that anywhere? First time I saw that, I was like, What? Yup. So the other thing that this really, comes back to haunt you is that if you were to look at the quadratic formula as a whole, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And you look at this as like one big thing. Let's split it up as fractions. What's that? Now, some people are like, well, yeah, that's fine. I get it. But if you think about this, right, the x direction is, or the x value of the zeros that we're looking for this thing, are going to be based off of wherever the vertex is. So we can take that, trace it back to the number line, our x-axis, and say, well, this is negative b over 2a. Then this distance here and this distance here is root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. I made this connection not even because of this. And the connection that I made here was really because of, you probably can't even see me circling with my mouse here. Okay, cool. Anyway. Trying to circle stuff in the midair and it's not working. Anyway, so yeah, these distances can be thought of because of looking at the absolute value function. So I was for a long time doing stuff like x minus a absolute value is equal to b, right? Just something random like this. When you're looking at this, you're saying here that the distance between x and a is b. And everybody wanted to go immediately from here to x minus a equals plus or minus b. That's off the chart. Okay, that's fine. X minus a equals plus or minus b. And again, I do the thing where I'm like, well, hang on, what does this really mean? Right, what does this really mean? So then I said, you know what, let's look at this. X someplace out there, we don't know where it is. A is like this particular value here. And the distance between whatever x is and our our a value has to be b. So you use this as a distance. You get this thing over here, you get this thing over here. This is a plus b. This is a minus b. So then the solution values for this particular thing are going to be these two individual values. Okay, well, we're essentially doing the same thing with this thing. We're saying that the distance between the x and our vertex is going to end up being and the vertex is technically its x value, is square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So what does that mean? Well, we got absolute value of x plus b over 2a if we were to move this to the other side is equal to square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. To get rid of the square root, you could square both sides. Anybody see where I'm going with this? Well, x plus b over 2a is x minus our h value from back here. This thing can shift over to the other side. So this is minus b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. This negative can come in and multiply. So x minus h squared plus 4ac minus b squared over 4a squared. And this thing here is precisely the k value that we found up here. Except it does have an extra a in the denominator. Okay, and this is equal to 0 on the other side. So this is x minus h squared, yep, plus k over a equals 0. Multiply everything by a. We've just reverse engineered, starting with the quadratic formula, starting with the distance idea that we had, we've reverse engineered a proof of the quadratic formula. So if you want a proof of how the quadratic formula actually works, go that way. All right, anyway. So this is way far afield for what we were doing, but so every semester I teach pre-calculus of some level or another. I have been doing a upper level pre-calc, which is basically both of our pre-calculus courses at the same time. So instead of like 3 credits each, it's 5 credits total. It is kind of insane, and I like it, but at the same time, like, students just kind of choose to be in that class, and I don't know that they know that what they're getting into. And then most times, once a year, at least once a year, I will be teaching like developmental algebra classes. Right now, as we're doing this whole like distance learning thing, it's really rough. I've got some students who are like racing through everything, and it's great because it's self-paced. It's a self-paced course, so they can go as fast as they want, and they'll get through everything they need to do in like a month. I have a student now who was only supposed to go through like 3 modules in this modular course. she is just about to pass the 6th. So that's like her class and the next class as well. So some people take all semester or longer to complete it, and she's doing it now in 2 classes in 1 semester, and she's going for a 3rd. Which we allow this particular sequence to be accelerated if you feel like it. And I mean, she's got some time, so. And once a year, usually, I try to get another prep, either in calculus or differential equations. DiffyQ was my specialty when I was doing my master's program, so they tend to use me a lot on that one. And Calc 1 I just like teaching a lot, because it's fun. Yeah, I also decided to play around with some of the stuff in differential equations, so now my differential equations class, instead of going from like the basic stuff in Unit 1 to talking about second order differential equations in Unit 2, and then talking about systems in Unit 3, I'll actually go from Unit 1 to Unit 3 and talk about linear algebra, and then bring it back to Unit 2 and talk about the second order differential equations, and they're like, this is amazing, like it's so easy to go through it. I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. No, I haven't touched Khan Academy in probably like a year. I was going through all the math stuff just for fun at one point, because I'm like, well, if my account that's on there is going to be, it was ridiculous. If my account is going to be like essentially teaching math in the comments section, I want to like essentially cover everything that's in the entire math program in Khan Academy, and they kept coming up with new videos, and I'm just like, you guys are too fast for me. I could have done it all, but I mean, it would have taken time out of my work day where I actually have to do real work, and so that wasn't going to happen. Or time out of my heavy schedule at night where I'm playing video games. Yeah. So geometry in there was kind of fun. I liked going through a lot of the old stuff. Epsilon-Delta proof. Yeah. So that's fun. Yes. So let's see if I can just rattle off one of these off the top of my head, but we'll see how it goes. Okay. Well, that's good, I guess. I can eventually catch up. Yeah, they got away from me pretty quick. And then I was like, oh, I've got to learn like 2nd and 3rd grade math because my daughter's going through the Common Core stuff. And I have to say, because I teach like this, I kind of like it. I see where they're going with it. And my spouse has a friend who at the time was a 5th grade teacher, and she was just getting all of the students that, yes, there are mixed reviews. I'll get into that in a minute. So she was just getting the students at that time who had only ever learned in Common Core. And she was just like, they understand it. Like it's such a stark contrast, even with the students from the previous year who had the same whatever math only in their kindergarten year or first grade year or something like that. The fifth graders that were coming in who had Common Core since the beginning just got it and understood math at such a deep level, she was shocked. And of course, there were some people who didn't, but it was a stark contrast for her in terms of teaching her students. So teachers who understand it, and teachers who are willing to try it and teach it at the level that they are supposed to teach it, and the students who get in and understand it, and whose parents aren't, hovering and teaching them the old ways of doing things. They're doing great, and they like it. It's the people who mostly have the biggest problems with it are the parents who don't understand, and the students who don't get it during class, so they're asking their parents, and their parents are like, here's the old way of doing it, you could just do it this way. And no. No, don't do that. All right. So Epsilon-Delta proofs, just generally speaking. What you're doing is you're trying to prove for any particular function that the limit as any particular x value, reaches a value of c is going to be L, your limit value. Now, here's the thing. This doesn't have to be a function which is particularly nice. It could be, in fact, a function which is missing something entirely. So, we could have a function which has a hole here. Alright, so we'll call this C1 and C2 here. Okay, so let's just suppose for a minute. You've got C1 here, C2 here. Both of their limits are L. A particular value L. Now, what does this whole limit thing mean? Well, you got to look back at continuity. And understand what it is that you're talking about with continuity. So remember that in order for a function to be continuous at any particular point or over any particular interval, you, one, have to have f of c needs to exist for all c along some interval a to b. Second was that the limit as x approaches c of f of x exists. So therefore, it has to be coming at the same point from both sides. Yeah. Break it down to rubble. Start over. I mean, that's essentially what I do when I'm researching stuff for, how can I teach this better? Is let's look up the way that I do things. Let's look up the way other people do them. Let's smash it to bits, and let's reconstruct it from the beginning, from the ground up. And the third one was that the limit as x approaches c of f of x is going to equal f at c. So remember, when you're looking at limits in terms of continuity, you're not looking at the value itself. You're looking at the area that is immediately surrounding the area, or surrounding the point in question, and you're basically closing off a little circle and making it smaller and smaller and smaller, and saying like, as we get closer to this particular point C1, comma, L, as we get closer, what's happening to the value of the function? So what we're doing is effectively drawing like a little circle around C1, L or C2, L, it doesn't matter. And then we're closing this thing in until we get a closer and closer picture. So then what we do is we say, well, this translates to some certain distance in the x direction. Which is going to be here. This is C1 minus some number delta, and C1 plus some number delta. So we are within a tiny distance of this particular point, whatever it might be. On the other side, we look at this and say, okay, the distance that we have here to either side is going to get us function values that are between two certain points. So this lower value here, now this is tiny, by the way. I shouldn't have done this. I should have made something a little better. But, and another point next to it, which is like here. Now this point down here is going to be L minus some value epsilon, and this value up here is going to be L plus some little tiny value epsilon. Infinitesimally small distance along the x-axis, yeah. So we're just saying that whatever it is, it's greater than 0, but it is tiny. And in fact, there are other sections which allow you to say you are able to pick a particular delta. So if we pick like a logarithmic type function like this, and you want to find this particular function value. This is not a very clean graph, but whatever. Let's say this function value here is 2. And I don't know, doesn't matter, right? So all right, so let's say x is 3, y is 2 at this particular point. So what we're going to do is say that we can go kind of two ways around this. So one is that yeah, there are two ways around this. One is that you say, okay, we want a particular value around 2. So we have an error, let's say. And let's say it's 0.1 for both, right? So we need to be within 0.1 of 2. Then translating this back, this is going to get us 2 different points on our function. Okay, so let's say this is 3, this is going to be about 2, that's going to be about 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, nope, 6. Alright, give or take. This is just all estimation anyway. So let's say for this particular function, we need to be within 0.1 of the value 2. Now, we trace this back, and over here, this gets us a function value. This particular one gets us a, the function value is 1.9. So 1.9 is equal to our function f at, let's say that's 2.7. And over here, we get a function value of 2.1 at f at f of, this is 4.6. Now the distance between 2.7 and 3, and the distance between 4.6 and 3 can be represented by these absolute values here. This is our this is our x minus our c. Let's put it over here. Absolute value x minus c are these things. Now these have specific values. So on this one we have 0.3. Because again, this is the absolute value of negative 0.3. Doesn't matter. Distance is 0.3. Over here, 4.6 minus 3 is going to be 1.6. Our distance between x minus c must be less than a certain delta value. For this particular problem, the delta that we're going to find can only be guaranteed to be less than 1.6. So for the problem that we've looked at here, x minus 3 is going to be less than 1.6. It's the best we can do. This will imply that the distance between the function value, f at x, whatever it might be, and the limit value, in this case 2, is going to be less than epsilon, which is 0.1. So absolute value f of x minus L is going to be less than epsilon. Now, just like I was doing with the quadratic thing up above, anybody who is here, this is like setting you up for understanding how this all works. So this is one way that this could work, is that you have a set distance that you need to be within a certain value of a particular target on the function value. So that's where we get the function value of 2. You are within 0.1 above or below that 2. Then you look at where the function values are, and again we got a value of 2.7 and a value of 4.6 were our two x values, or the two potential c value, the two potential x values that we had over here. And then again, one of them got us 0.3, the other one got us 1.6. Again, you can only Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, 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 nope. I'm wrong. I went the other way. This is not 1.6. This one has to be the better of the two, the more strict of the two. You can only guarantee epsilon less than 0.1, or epsilon less than or equal to 0. Okay, epsilon equals. With a delta value of 0.3 or less. Because again, if you go outside of 0.3, then you're going to be outside of this bound. So you're going to be over on this part of the function. And that is not what we want. If you try to say, okay, we can go this far away, that corresponds to, again, a different value on the x side. So it'd be like down here, right? That's not allowed. Yep. So that's one way of going about this. Again, 0.3 is going to be our best that we can do. So when we actually do a proof and say, like, here's the limit of this particular function, we already know what the limit of the function is going to be. We're basically just going through the steps of proving that that is, in fact, what we're doing. So the Epsilon-Delta proof says that, like, for f of x equals, I don't know, they usually do a linear function, so it looks kind of stupid when you're doing this. 3x minus 2, limit, prove, limit as x approaches 4 of f of x is equal to, well, let's see, that's going to be 10. All right, so there are two ways, or two sections of an epsilon delta proof. One is starting with the end, starting with your assumption. So the absolute value, or the distance between our f of x and the L, is less than epsilon. And then proving, or showing that this can go over to absolute value x minus c is less than delta, delta, and you get the relationship between epsilon and delta. That's not confusing at all. It's fine. So we want to get the relationship that exists between epsilon and delta first. So you plug all this stuff in. This is going to be absolute value of 3x minus 2 minus 10 is less than some particular epsilon. So 3x minus 2 minus 10 is going to be 3x minus 12. It's less than epsilon. Where am I? There. Literally, where am I? All right, then this is a absolute value of 3 times the quantity, x minus 4. Is less than epsilon. Absolute value of 3 times the absolute value of x minus 4 is less than epsilon. and divide both sides by 3, so the absolute value of x minus 4 is less than epsilon divided by 3. Again, not at all confusing. It's fine. Which we can now let delta be equal to epsilon over 3. So the relationship that exists between these two things is now that epsilon over 3 is equal to our delta. Then we have to go backwards. Part 2. Construct the proof using the relationship. So we start out with the fact that we have x minus 4 is less than delta, and we let delta equal epsilon over 3. So the absolute value of x minus 4 is less than epsilon over 3. We can multiply on both sides, so that's 3 times the quantity absolute value x minus 4 is less than epsilon. Multiply in your 3, so this is the absolute value. Technically you could do absolute value of 3 times the absolute value of x minus 4 first. That's not so big of a deal, but you know, some people prefer that. This is the absolute value of 3x minus 12 is less than epsilon, which is now absolute value of 3x minus 2 minus 10, less than epsilon. So now we've shown that the function f of x, 3x minus 2, now has a distance from this particular point, or from this particular function to 10, which is less than epsilon. So part 1 is not part of the proof technically. It's only trying to find the relationship between epsilon and delta, and again, technically, you won't be, you know, depending on your teacher. one of my colleagues says, well, I'm not grading you on this part. I'm grading you on this part, and you better have the right relationship. So you better have found where the right relationship comes from. And they're like, but that means that you would grade me on the other thing. And he's like, he's funny and ridiculous. So this again proves that if we have the distance in the x direction between x and 4 being less than some delta, so whatever that might be, then when we multiply out the 3 from the other side, oh, magically it appears and all this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. We get through this, and then we split this up into f of x minus L, our limit. It'll always work every time, just as long as you're... pretty much. Yeah, the fun ones are when you start doing stuff like g of x is equal to x plus 4 times x minus 1. Shouldn't do 0, that's no fun. Alright, so prove that the limit as x approaches -1 of g of x is equal to, so that's -1 is -2, -1 is 3. So 3 and -2 make -6. Now this one gets harder because now you've got this absolute value with separate terms. And I don't even remember if I can do this one because it's been an awfully long time since I've done quadratics in Calc 1, but basically you're doing the same thing as you did up above, where we're looking at the distance the distance between -1 and some x value. And again, we have to start with x plus 4 times x minus 1 minus the limit value, -6, is less than epsilon. Then how are we going to break this up? So I think, oh dear, I think we might have to actually do this out. It's x squared plus 3x minus 4 plus 6. Yeah. Alright, yeah, I remember now. So this is x squared plus 3x plus 2, which then breaks into x plus 2x plus 1. So once we do all this out, right, this becomes x squared plus 3x plus 2 is less than epsilon. Absolute value x plus 2, x plus 1 is less than epsilon. Alright, so the x plus 1 has to stay here. This is the weird thing. The x plus 1 has to stay here because that's the value we want for our limit. Which means that we've got absolute value of x plus 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1 is less than epsilon, which means that absolute value of x plus 1 is less than epsilon over absolute value x plus 2. I do have my calc book, but unfortunately it is under my monitor. Okay. So for this, we can assume that our delta value is going to be pretty small. So we also want this to be like, we want this to be really small because we don't really want we don't want our function to start interacting with the other 0. So we need we need our delta value to be probably less than 1. From -1 to -4, we've still got a value of like 3 distance. So like, as long as you're not picking a value near 3, we're okay. So if we let that's fun. So one thing that we can do is say, instead of doing this part, if x plus 2 Again, let's pick a small value. Okay. I'm not quite doing this right. All right, hang on one sec. All right, anyway. So yeah, we want this thing to be a small value. So on like one side or the other, it's going to be between two particular values. So if I'm looking at this right from my notes there, which are not particularly. Yeah, okay. So if we let x be 1 to either side of our value here, or if we let x, wait, hang on. If we let x be 0 just for this one moment, then we're going to get a value of 2 here. So we know that this would be greater than a value of 1 times absolute value x plus 1. And it's going to be less than 3 times that value. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've done this, but if we go to either side of 2, that's the value we're going to get here. So it goes to either side. Yeah. We get a 1 and a 3 on either side of our 2 here. All right, now on the bigger side, we can let 3 times absolute value x plus 1 be less than epsilon. Okay, we're going to do this because our original value, absolute value x plus 2 times the absolute value x plus 1, is going to be less than 3 times the absolute value of x plus 1, which itself is also going to be smaller than epsilon because epsilon is going to be tiny. I think that works. Yeah, cool. All right. It might not even be let. I think that's just so. Keep doing that. All right, which means that the absolute value of x plus 1 is going to be less than epsilon over 3, just like we did from the last example. And then the proof part is, again, basically just a rehashing of everything we did here, but in reverse order. So the absolute value of x plus 1 is going to be less than delta. Oops. Let epsilon over 3 be equal to delta. So we got delta. Absolute value x plus 1 is going to be less than, epsilon. Epsilon over 3. Multiply across. This is going to be 3 times the absolute value x plus 1. It's less than epsilon. And then 3, absolute value x plus 1 is going to be less than absolute value x plus 1 times the absolute value of x plus 2, which is going to be greater than 1 times absolute value x plus 1. Which then allows us to say that this combined with that is going to get us that the absolute value of x plus 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1 is going to be less than epsilon. And this is the absolute value of x squared plus 3x plus 2. It's less than epsilon. And again, here you can factor out the term you need. So we need a plus 6 minus 4. And again, 3x plus x squared, absolute value, less than epsilon. This portion can factor into x plus 4x minus 1. And then we get the plus 6, which is technically minus negative 6. Less than epsilon. So, again, technically. So, the Epsilon-Delta... Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Craig, for coming. And I will... Yeah, I'm streaming... for anybody. I'm streaming on Wednesdays to do math stuff. Again, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then on Fridays I do some gaming stuff. And, you know, like anybody else, random surprise streams occasionally, but it's only when I'm just bored and feel like showing off what I'm doing. My gaming stuff recently, I have been working on Control, which is bizarre, but pretty cool. And I've been thinking about getting into Astroneer, and there's a couple more that I want to do. But Astroneer is kind of the big one, because I've been playing Astroneer since beta. It's a really great game. I love it. Okay, so to answer Killer King's question, right? What is Epsilon-Delta even for? So Epsilon-Delta is a proof method that will get you a regimented way to prove that a limit is a certain thing. Now, for any useful function like what we've been doing up here, this is basically trivial. You look at this and you say, okay, I can find the limit of a linear function, no problem. I can find the limit of a quadratic function with maybe some trouble. And again, you can do the same for any other type of function that's out there. You just have to be very careful about how you're doing it. But the proof is really kind of the whole reason that we're doing it. To be able to say, if we've got this particular kind of function, how do we then prove that the limits are what we say they are? How do you even prove that, you know, the function value of this thing is at -1 is going to be in fact -6? Now we know we can just plug it in, but at the very, very super high levels of math, we're talking like junior level undergrad math major, or we're talking graduate level stuff. When you start going into that super high level stuff, you start looking at like the philosophical arguments behind mathematics. So like, why do these things even exist in the first place? How do you know that you can do all of the things that you say you've been able to do for years upon years? Why are you allowed to do this? And you have to basically start from nothing and construct the whole of mathematics all over again for yourself to convince yourself that yes, this is the way things work. In terms of actually being able to use the Epsilon-Delta proofs, there is the possibility that you would be using that to figure out the limits for new types of functions. So something beyond what we've ever studied. You know, you come up with a new function, okay, you've got to now prove the limits for it. Figure out what it does when you approach certain values or what have you. So when you start looking at like rational functions, for instance, your rational function then is going to, that one's a little weirder. You have to basically prove that as you go further out, you get smaller and smaller values, and those smaller and smaller values will eventually be smaller than any other number you could ever create. And so you know that your asymptote approaches zero. Same for if you're doing a vertical asymptote, you need to prove that as you get closer to this thing, it's going to produce a number that is larger than any other number you could ever produce. And so therefore the limit is going off to infinity. And again, this is regimented, so it's talking about the formalization of proving anything. In this particular case, the formalization of limits, the limit definition. Well, anybody else have any other questions? So, welcome to other people that I did not see come in. So, F to pair and electrical longboard. Welcome in. This is N Simplex Pachinko, and I am your master of ceremonies, I guess. Obi-Wan Pez. So, happy to help you all out. And unfortunately, that yawning does mean I'm probably going to leave pretty soon. Unless anybody has any questions.